think you're going to really enjoy hearing from, because this is a man who lived through communism and lived in a country where there was no freedom, and he is just an amazing man. This guy, I've really enjoyed meeting him over the last 3 days. I've met so many amazing people, but he has really just inspired me. Dr. Yoserev.
I never wrote a book either, and I'm not a speaker, I'm not even a rabbi or a Jew. But today I was given the gift of the most valuable bracelet I've ever received. It's a plastic one, because it represents the honor of speaking with you at this event. My name is Rafael Diaz-Yoserev. I was born in Cuba, and I am very proud of my heritage, but I am not a Cuban American. I am an American. Because I've had enough of the hyphenated names and the things that divide us. Enough of that. We are all Americans. As a child in Cuba, I experienced firsthand the communist takeover of a proud and hardworking nation. Fidel Castro and his bearded gang gained control of the government in January of 1959, essentially by default. And he was promising social justice, if that rings a bell, equality, and the end of corruption, draining the swamp. But as soon as they had control of the government, they began incarcerating people, incarcerating the opponents, killing a lot of them by firing a squad under the personal supervision of the mercenary Che Guevara. Then they started confiscating private lands, industries, and other private properties in the name of reform. They began the dismantling of the family and the strong moral fiber of the Cuban people by forcing the teenagers into separation from their parents and voluntary service in the countryside, all together, boys and girls, while alienating the church and religious practice. Indoctrination was the order of the day, and telling the children that they, the children, in many cases knew better than the parents. Does that sound familiar to you, Al Gore? After about a year and a half, Castro declared himself a Marxist. Many parents, fearing losing control of the children to indoctrination and the state, opted for sending the children alone to the United States. And that is how I got to Miami, as a Cuban refugee, not as an immigrant, as a Cuban refugee, at the age of 13. It was 15 years before I saw my parents again, and I thought I never would see them again, 12 of which they spent in political prison. How did this all happen? Ignorance. The civil society was not prepared for what was coming on to us. Nobody thought that the United States would permit a communist takeover of a country just 90 miles from the shores. But most important, we didn't have a Second Amendment. So we had nothing to defend ourselves with. I look at what is happening now in my new country, and I say to myself, and for my children and my grandchildren, I lost my country when I was 13 years old, but I am not 13 years old anymore, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let that happen again. Because now I have a Second Amendment. This is the last dance for me. I'm going to mention something that it was already said by Mr. Navarro before me, but I wanted to mention it, which is that many Hispanics have experiences similar to my own, and most of them have been exposed to the Marxist communist rhetoric. In addition, most of them, just like the black community, have strong family values, are believers, mostly Christians, hardworking, and want to live with dignity. Those are conservative values, my friends. The problem is that we have allowed the liberals and the progressives to monopolize that conversation. And we have failed to carry the message effectively. Now we're beginning to do so with organizations like the one that was mentioned before. And many of us are coming on TV a lot and mentioning this and bringing them into the fold, because we need to teach them and let them know that they really belong with us. They don't belong under the boot of the liberals and the progressives. I have not been surprised by this president, this wolf in sheep's clothing. They all act the same way. They all say the same things. But if you have been exposed to them once, you can smell them 100 miles away. They deny and deny and deny all accusations until they decide it's time to admit it. Does it sound familiar, Reverend Wright? And so now I hear our president talk about internationalism. Subjecting our sovereignty, hard-earned sovereignty, to the revision and possible mandates of the United Nations. And cohorting with our enemies, foreign and domestic, while alienating our allies. It is very difficult to talk about domestic enemies, but we have them. And they are fierce, and we need to stop them. I hear our president, ever so sleek, talk to people based on his black liberation theology beliefs and say that his individual salvation is based on our collective salvation. And I laugh. My individual salvation is between me and my God. So Barry, you are on your own. We have ended up being governed by a president who is beholden to the labor unions, supported by a group in Congress which continues to abdicate their own responsibilities and constitutional powers in favor of the executive branch, and aided by judiciary and a Supreme Court that is converting our system of government into an oligarchy. And pretty soon, and if we don't stop them, we will be governed by presidential decree, just like in Venezuela. It is evident that the temporary success has emboldened them, to the point where they're letting us see what is behind the mask. So we now get to see some of them admitting that they are admirers of Mao Zedong, or self-avowed communists, or openly praising the works of Hugo Chavez. They are also now threatening us with slogans that they will use the power of persuasion, but if that doesn't work, they will use the persuasion of power. Or, we know who you are, we are taking names, and we know where you live. And these are not even elected officials. Andy Stern, the ex-president of SEIU, is very fond of using the slogan of the International Socialists, "Workers of the world, unite." And not too long ago in an interview, he said, "Workers of the world, unite" is not a slogan anymore. Well, I have news for you, Andy. We are the workers of the world, and we are united. We are united against the stranglehold of the unions. We are united against tyranny. We are united against the overtaxation of the federal government. We are united against outside interests writing bills that they are passed by Congress without even reading. We are against the corruption in government. We are against the indoctrination of our children. Leave my kids alone. We are against cap and trade. We are against illegal immigration. We are against the welfare state and the redistribution of wealth. In one sentence, we are against the fundamental transformation of America. Now let's tell Andy what we are for. We are united for the belief that we are all created equal. And it doesn't really matter where you were born, does it? Because our rights are natural rights, and they are given to us by our Creator. We are for support and respect of our Constitution. We are for the return of God to the public life. We are for individual liberty and responsibility. We are for the return of government to its constitutional mandate and staying there. We are for the return of honor and dignity in our civil servants. We are for the support of our troops. We are for the future of our children. We are for legal, orderly, and generous immigration. We are for our leadership position in the world so that we can continue to protect peace, civil rights, and human dignity all over. We are for the return to our basic principles and the fundamental restoration of America. So let's take our country back and proclaim to the world that freedom works. We are free. We can be free, and so can you. Freedom! Thank you.